Welcome to The Point of View. This is your favorite current affairs show on television. Here on The Point of View, we pick the right topics, we get the right guests, and ask them relevant questions on issues that matter to you. We're live tonight on possibly the most important topic over the past few months: the cost of living, price of petroleum products, the politics and the economics of all of that. It's an hour of deliberation on what is irking a lot of Ghanaians. We have two very important guests on the show. We also have some charts to show you. We'll bring you some highlights also from Minister of Finance in his attempt to explain why the fuel prices keep going up and what can be done to cushion Ghanaians. Join us with your comments on the WhatsApp number we'll put on the screen shortly. We'll be right back. So welcome back. So tonight we'll try and reflect on fuel prices. The increases that were predicted have happened. So now in Ghana, the average price you pay per litre for petrol is around 11 cedis. For diesel, it's around 13 cedis. This is very serious. Why do the prices keep going up? Is it just the Russia-Ukraine war? Is it global uncertainty? Or is it a tax build-up? My guest will help us break all of that down. We'll also try and compare these numbers with what we have in other African countries. Is it just a Ghana situation, or are other countries also suffering? And then we'll try and find out from government what they will do about this. So I have in studio Duncan Amwa, Chief Executive of the Chamber of Petroleum Consumers. They've become a very important part of the conversation. They've made predictions that always come to pass. In fact, this weekend on The Big Issue, he actually said we could have a looming petroleum shortage. This was before a Kodonto story on Bloomberg. Welcome to the show.
Bernard, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You dress like Kwame Nkrumah. What's the issue?
I think we should reset this country back to
Nkrumah settings, factory settings.
Where we are headed there.
It's always fair enough. We also have joining us is economist and political risk analyst Theophilus Echampong. He's joining us all the way from Europe. Theo, good to have you. Good evening.
Good evening and greetings to everyone. And I like Duncan's hat.
He's marketing Ghana very well.
We'll send you somewhere you are, Theo.
Yeah.
I wanted to start the show by asking your comment on three charts my team put together. The first chart is that of petroleum prices for some countries in West Africa. So Ghana, a lot of the Francophone countries, and Nigeria. From the chart, we see that we've converted this to Ghana cedis for easy comparison. Nigeria is charging 3 cedi, 26 pesos per litre on average, right? This is for the average of petrol and diesel. The highest is Senegal, and in fact, this is before we added the latest increase in Ghana. So in Ghana, the figure is a bit higher now. But for the numbers we used, which is last month, 11.35 for Senegal, which is the highest. Ghana is 10.22. Ivory Coast is 9.38. Burkina Faso, 9.12. Togo, Benin, Nigeria. Now, this is from Global Petrol Economics a month and a half ago. Now, I want to compare this with two things. We also picked out inflation rate. Now, the economics I did tells me that you don't compare inflation rate across countries generally as a rule, because the rate depends on the base. But I wanted to still show this because I feel the fact that Ghana is the highest still is something to say, because the rate, this is inflation that you compare year on year. So prices are increasing in Ghana 27.6% the rate they were last year. So yes, you can say every country's inflation is different, but still for Ghana, our inflation for West Africa is very high. Nigeria is the second, 17.71. Burkina Faso, and then Togo, Senegal, Ivory Coast, and Benin. And Senegal's inflation is the highest in a long time as well. So this 7 is very, very high for them. Now, this is from Trading Economics. The last one that I wanted to show, and then I'll pick your comments, is the minimum wage average. Again, We took the gross minimum wage per month per country. We converted it to US dollars. And what the team found was pretty interesting. Ivory Coast weighted gross minimum wage is 810 Ghana cedis from the calculations we did. For Nigeria, 779 cedis. Again, we converted from dollars to cedis. Senegal is also higher. Ghana has the lowest minimum wage. So this is the first premise I want to come from. And of course, you can use minimum wage as a proxy of average weight. So I'll start with the economist, Theo. Theo, is it fair to make this comparison? Our fuel price is the second highest in West Africa. Our wages are the lowest among the countries I've put up, and our inflation is the highest. You are the economist here. What story are we telling with these charts?
Thank you once again, and good evening, and thank you for putting me on the spot on this. I think we can start with the very first chart on the petrol prices. And as perhaps some of our viewers may know and others, there are three key things that goes into the price buildup. One, the cost of the product itself, which we're buying in dollars and then importing it into the country. Number two, if you're buying it in dollars, then you have to change your local currency, in our case, the cedi, and bring the product into your country. And then number three, the taxes or the levies and margins that are imposed on these products. So within the pricing equation architecture that you see for all of these countries on your screen, you would have various components of these three variables having a key part, right, of the pricing architecture. And this is where it gets interesting. So whereas Ghana or Benin or Togo were all importing these products from outside largely, the exchange rates that we're using are not the same. In our case, we've had a persistent, hemorrhaging of the cedi, at least for the better part of 2022. For the likes of Benin, Togo, to an extent Ivory Coast, remember that they are part of the CFA West African CFA franc zone, and to that extent, the Central Bank of the West African franc zone literally provides an extra layer of stability where the exchange rates that they use is pegged or fixed to the euro. So that cushions them a little bit to an extent than what we have in Ghana, where we have, in my view, a very, very kind of largely open economy, and we tend to experience the shocks a little bit more than others. And then the last bit is the taxes, where in Ghana's case, we're talking almost 40, sometimes 50% tax buildup on the price component. So that is what potentially explains the different prices you're seeing. Nigeria is a bit of an outlier because they produce more oil, and the prices normally are kept a little bit artificially low. Then when you look at your second and third charts, it also gets really interesting on the wage, and then you show the second chart, if I recall, on the inflation rate. On the inflation, you do see this big cost inflation or push through, especially in Ghana as compared to the other countries. So Togo, Benin, Senegal, again, because of the fact that they have this big monetary union and the currency to an extent is pegged to the euro, and they also tend to import quite a bit, but mostly from France and other places, you don't tend to have that big inflationary push factor in there as compared to Ghana. As somebody once told me that in Ghana, we import literally everything from, bicycle spokes to toothpick in that regard. And that is what you see persistently feeding through. When you break the inflation numbers down, it gets more interesting in the sense that the major driver in Ghana's case, you have both food and non-food. But predominantly in Ghana's case, you're seeing the non-food inflation having a major impact on the consumer basket. And on average, the typical household in Ghana is spending about 50% of their consumption expenditure on food, fuel, and transportation. So you begin to see how then when you go to the third chart on the
minimum wage,
on the minimum wage, you begin to see the pressure beginning to impact people in Ghana a lot more than you see in these other countries. I think on the minimum wage, though, what we would have probably done for better comparative for this exercise would have been to actually adjust the wage data with some sort of purchasing power parity index, and at least we can compare apples for apples. But be that as it may, what this really indicates that the wage levels in Ghana are relatively low compared to our regional neighbors, and therefore any pass-through or shocks coming from inflation and others would have a significant impact on consumer welfare.
Fantastic, thank you. Let me pick Duncan's thoughts on these charts, the mix of inflation, wages, and fuel prices. What are your thoughts?
Well, I share Dr. Tio Champon's initial thoughts that we actually import in everything. And so it's difficult to hold inflation in our part of the world. As we speak, what these charts for me, what it speaks to me, is a situation where price of fuel in Togo, our next neighbor, Togo, who doesn't have the resource, we used to compare country to country, and then the excuse you get is that, oh, Nigeria produces far more volumes than we do. But as we speak, Togo doesn't produce anything. But their price, the last time I checked, was around 7 cedis. And we have crossed averages of 12 Ghana cedi. Diesel at 11, diesel at 13, petrol around 10, 11. If you sum the two, you're probably looking at about 12 cedi per liter. So one of the challenges coming out of all of this is that you would have a lot of trucks now crossing from Togo into Ghana with fuel. What that means is that your volumes in Ghana, which the taxes will be collected on, will dwindle.
So people will smuggle from Togo to Ghana?
Yes.
Because the price difference is that high?
Is that high. Initially, somewhere 10 years ago, the reverse was the case. So people used to smuggle from Ghana to Togo. If you recall, there was a lot of talk about we are losing money. But now it's the reverse. If you use the Aflao Road, mostly weekends, you find those big trucks. I know the NPA has done some work along that stretch, but you can't stop it because the profits or the gains are quite huge. And so one of the fallouts is that the projected revenue that you expect to get from your petroleum taxes, you might not get it because your neighboring countries, Nigeria is cheaper, Togo is cheaper, Burkina is cheaper.
Ivory Coast is cheaper.
So in those days when they could come by from you, or their trucks will want to load from you, they would rather load.
How easy is it to smuggle petrol from other countries into Ghana?
Bernard, you know you have those transit trucks who come to pick, products here and there. Sometimes they'll tell you the gallons they are bringing is for their own use. They would end here. But there are other trucks that would also meet. See, there was this story when we went to Aplao. An elderly person explained to us that in times past, they even laid, pipelines under.
Oh, really?
Yes, that could, transfer product from a certain distance into Togo. So pumping product the reverse way is a possibility. And I am saying this on a national TV. There's that trade that is quite booming on the Aflao stretch currently. And
so we should expect some smuggling and therefore loss in revenue, even on the price build-up.
Yes.
All right. So that your first reaction to this. I wanted to play what the finance minister said, because today in Parliament, they put some questions to him. Two of the urgent questions had to do with petroleum. One from Edward Bauer and another from an NPP MP whose name I can't recollect readily. But this is the finance minister's reaction or response to the question about what he was going to do about the increase in prices. So, gentlemen, please listen. I'll take your reaction.
As part of measures to alleviate the burden of high cost of fuel at the pump on consumers, government did suspend the price of radiation recovery levies, which is a charge on petrol, diesel, and LPG from November 2021 to the end of January 2022. The PSRL imposes a 16 peso per litre levy on petrol, 14 pesos per litre on diesel, 14 pesos per kilogram on LPG. The levy was suspended as part of efforts to cushion consumers from the constant rise in the price of fuel products in the country. The suspension of this levy resulted in a loss of revenue of about 182.6 million for that period. Government also intervened to suspend the margins on the petroleum price build-up by a total of 15 pesos per litre effective 1st April for 3 months as part of measures to slow down the increasing petroleum products prices at the pump. The details were followed. Bus margin reduced by 2 pesos per litre. Unified Petroleum Pricing Fund margin reduced by 9 pesos per litre. Fuel margin reduced by 1 peso per litre. And primary distribution margin reduced by 3 pesos per litre. With regards to the depreciation of the cedi, Mr. Speaker, the Bank of Ghana, as we know, is the lead interventionist in the issue of the currency. The Ministry of Finance is complementing their efforts through its fiscal consolidation measures and rail sector interventions. The implementation of the 30% cut in expenditures and other expenditure measures approved by Cabinet are all helping to reduce the fiscal deficit and thereby reduce the pressures on the exchange rate. In addition, government is undertaking rail sector interventions, including the Ghana Cares program, to support import substitution of products such as poultry, rice, etc., thereby reducing foreign exchange pressures from the imports of these products. Furthermore, the implementation of the AFCFTA positions Ghana as a continental trade hub and boosts exports to support exchange rate stability as a goal. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Finance, as you know, is also arranging to raise $1 billion to support the 2022 budget and foreign exchange reserves. This, of course, is in this House. This foreign inflow is expected to improve supply of the foreign currency and the stability of the local currency. Mr. Speaker, last Thursday, 16th June 2022, we laid before you the syndicated term loan, and we are respectfully requesting this Augusta to expedite action in approving it. This will be a key intervention to contain the depreciation of the cedi. We look forward to working with the House to ensure that this is passed.
So that was Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta. In summary, he said some taxes had been reduced between April and May, June, 3 months. Some margins had been reduced, and that they were working to shore up the cedi. So essentially, this was his answer to the question. What's your reaction?
Bernard, I'm not too sure how to start with the finance minister, but let me go back to the charts quickly. You know, all of what, you've done, there's one thing running through all of them. The global context has not changed with these countries. There's still Russia, Ukraine, there's COVID. But for a lot of the countries, even within the sub-region, a lot of whom do not produce any oil, they are still able to manage their prices a lot better than we are doing. So it means there's something missing, or there's something we are not getting right that they seem to probably get right. We would not argue for a subsidy program, but whatever the magic could be with Burkina, with Togo, with Benin, I'm sure there's something we could learn from them, for which reason they could do 7 cities we are doing 12. If it is a function of just the taxes, then indeed the taxes is not helping all of us. Now let me go to the finance minister quickly. We were hopeful that today he will make known to Ghanaians what policy interventions he intends to roll out in the face of 13 Ghana cedi per litre for diesel and 11 Ghana cedi for petrol. But what he is recounting are the very measures that have failed to produce any results. Now, he talks of reducing taxes and margins. I'm putting on record that he's not reduced any single tax on petrol.
Really?
Yes, not one. What was done between December, January, if you recall, when the president stepped in, was to zero the price stabilization and recovery levy, which is a tax we all pay anyway, to zero. But it has been brought back. So Ghanaians at this time when fuel pricing is already high are still paying for stabilization and recovery levy. We have asked several questions of authorities. Why you are charging for stabilization and recovery within a deregulated space when you don't have any under recoveries? The excuse you get is that we need that money to subsidize premix. And so we have said if you need money for premix and RFO subsidy, go back to Parliament, right, and ask them for 5 pesos to subsidize for our fishing expedition, instead of leaving the 16 pesos per litre that we pay for stabilization and recovery levy. They listen, they agree, but that has not been done. And so Ghanaians will still pay 16 pesos a litre for stabilization. We are not stabilizing. The last time we did any numbers, we would have accrued more than 4 billion from the stabilization fund, which should have been created. But when you ask questions, the answer you get is that we've used it to subsidize premix. How much has gone into premix? Are the fishermen really getting the subsidy that you and I pay for? Should we continue to pay that subsidy in these gruesome times? I don't have the answers.
What about the margins he mentioned? UPPF, Boston margin, and other margins reduced, 115 per litre, 2 per litre, 9 per litre.
Bernard, you know the challenge with those margins. In fact, we met with the finance minister and the energy minister, the NPA. We met with Seaboard. In fact, it was a room full of everybody. We had discussed some of the taxes that he could look at. We were clear the road fund, which is about 48 pesos, you couldn't touch because we've used that for loans all over the place. We were clear that the special petroleum tax, which had been introduced at the time that crude prices had dropped below what we had budgeted or projected, 2015, we introduced that SPT as a stopgap revenue measure. Now, it can no longer hold because what you projected at $57, $58 in your budget, you are over-recovering. And so you are getting what some MPs have termed as windfall, right? So take SPT, half of it is 46 pesos. Don't scrap everything. Take 23 pesos and give the consumer 23 pesos. Bernard, just for 3-4 months so that we can observe the market. We're also clear that sanitation and pollution levy that was introduced in recent times of 10 pesos. In times like these, when everybody is complaining of fuel pricing, you could scale down on that. We were quite clear that there's a double incidence of energy sector levies on the price build-up. In fact, there's the first one called ESLA. That is about 49 pesos or 48 pesos. And then we've introduced a recent one called energy sector levy, 20 pesos. Okay, maintain the first one to pay the legacy debt. But the second one that was introduced of 20 pesos, you could halve it, you could decide to let it go at least for temporal, period, so that we all observe what the trends would be like. The finance minister decided to ignore all these advices. He decided on his own that the most significant thing he could do was to go and touch margins. Bernard, let me tell you why the margins will become risky and for which just this morning yourself and Senor, my brother, were discussing looming fuel shortage. The margins is what keeps the industry running. So look at it. Finance minister has not done Ghanaians any favor if he takes out UPPF, which is supposed to pay transporters. He's not done anybody any favor. That is supposed to pay transporters. There's the bust margin that we feel at this point we could have even scrapped all altogether. And then there's the PDM, which also pays transporters. And then there's another one that I think he did 1 peswa of Bernard. All the tax build-up that we have on the fuel as we speak are at their optimum levels. Not one has been dropped. So what he is saying, I cannot probably agree or understand, because the numbers are there. They speak for themselves. And then again, he is also running away from the issue of windfalls.
We'll deal with the windfall when we come back. I also talk to an economist about whether there are rigidities. You know, economists have big words. They call something rigidities in the budget, whether there are rigidities in the pricing that they can't deal with. The other question is the issues around why we don't refine and whether that would have helped us, and what will happen if the Ukraine-Russia war keeps going on. Will they just keep passing the price on to us, or will there be a breaking point? This is the point of view. We're talking about petrol prices, politics, and survival. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Point of View. Tonight we're trying to put 3 issues together: fuel prices, cost of living, survival, and politics. I got a message from an economist I just wanted to read to buttress the point that economist on the show, Dr. Echampon, said. So this is Dr. Edu Sarkodie. He says, Bernard, I'm watching you. To get a better comparison, use the purchasing power parity, which Dr. Theo also said, which is the same as the real exchange rates. To get that, multiply the ratio of prices in the 2 countries and the nominal exchange rate. Okay, so we'll probably do that for a subsequent program, but you take note that our exchange rate depreciation has been the worst in the countries. I didn't put that up, but if I'm pushed, I can show you that the exchange rate for Ghana, in terms of depreciation, has been in the same category of comparator countries. Our exchange rate has been the worst in terms of the cedi's performance against the dollar. Depreciated by about 20% since January. So yes, Doc, I will do that calculation, but I still think that if you look at wages, inflation, fuel prices, you put those 8 or 9 countries together, Ghanaians are bearing the worst, because our fuel prices are the second highest, our inflation is the highest, our minimum wage is the lowest, and our exchange rate has performed the worst. But Doc, let me come to you again. I wanted your thoughts on, you said 40% of the cost build-up is in taxes and margins. You are the economist. Apart from what Duncan has said, where else could we have gotten some reprieve from the finance minister?
If you recall, the finance minister, or let's say the government, a few weeks ago, did reduce some of the taxes, and there was a lot of hullabaloo about it, including some statement. But actually, when I worked it out, the effective reduction you were getting was just around 1.6%, in fact, less than 2%.
Wow.
Reduction, yes. But the communication was made to look as though, of course, government was doing something for the citizens. And when you take the numbers and you break them down, like Duncan has actually indicated, the levies, if you sum all of them up, is just around 2 cedis and 11 pesos, thereabouts, yeah? Mm-hmm. And then the margins is around 1 cedi and 9 pesos. So when you add the 2 up, you're getting a little around 3 cedi 20, 3 cedi 30 pesos. And if you assume the price of petrol is 10 or 11 cedis, you can actually work out the ratios to get the relative proportions of that. I have always argued, and you can see my record on this, that some of the levies and those tax handles don't actually belong there. For example, the sanitation and pollution levy of 10 pesos, I don't see how that should be there. And then also when we take this price stabilization and recovery levy, I think there's an interesting argument in there, because when you look at the data, and ASEP has done some fantastic work on this, you can actually see that over the period, what we have used that money for literally is to subsidize premix. Duncan talks about that, and RFO. However, when you look at the Act 899, the Energy Sectors Levy Act, that sets up that PSRL, it talks about using that to stabilize prices for the consumer, amongst other things. So question is, why haven't we actually used that for the core objective of setting up that fund, but rather than using it to subsidize premix? And in any case, when you look at, again, the premix data, what is quite clear is that there is siphoning, there's diversion, and in fact, many a time, the fisher folks even complain that the premix is not, available to them. So you really have this perverse set of incentives really at play here. And I think what can realistically be done really is on the levies component, not so much on the margins, because the margins is what keeps the industry going, and there's not much that you can really do in that regard. The second thing that can also be done is to do with the whole idea of CD and getting access to dollars to be able to support the importation. And here I think the recent Bank of Ghana move to auction some dollars for the BDCs is welcome. But we have a bigger dollar requirement in that regard. I was looking at the numbers. Our fuel import bill for last year alone was $2.7 billion. The total import bill of Ghana was around $13.6 billion. In other words, we're spending 20%
wow.
of 20 cents of every one CD that we're making in terms of imports, just purely on petroleum products. And so if you have the prices going up, then it means you need more dollars to actually be able to bring those products in. And historically, the BDCs have said that if they go to the commercial banks to borrow, then they have to pay a higher exchange rate, right, for that. And so the Bank of Ghana stepping in, and I advocate that they need to perhaps for the next few weeks provide a bit more dollars to be able to bring those products in. But fundamentally, the other worry or the unintended consequence also of this is that when you look at the data again from the same Bank of Ghana, we are literally burning through our reserves as a country. So the import cover used to be around 5 months. Now we're talking almost 3.7 months. And the critical threshold is actually less than 3 months. And the way we're going, if we keep burning through the reserves to be able to prop up, say, fuel imports, things like that, then I suspect that we might actually be facing a severe balance of payments crisis, and we would have no cost but to go to the IMF for some form of support one way or the other.
Let me just pursue this a bit more. In a way, is the revenue objective of the finance ministry worsening our inflation, in the sense that petrol seems to be the most important cost driver in Ghana? By refusing to reduce the petrol price by taking off those taxes and getting the revenue you want, you are getting revenue, but because petrol affects transport, food, and everything else, your inflation keeps going up, erodes everything you get by way of whatever the Bank of Ghana is trying to do. So in essence, your fiscal policy is rendering your monetary policy useless. Can I make that conclusion, or it's too early?
No, absolutely. That's to put it in very crude terms, is what is happening, because you have a mismatch between what the Bank of Ghana is doing within their mandate. So they've hiked up their policy rate by 550 basis points, 5.5% over the last few weeks to try and tame inflation. But in that same breath, when you decouple the drivers of inflation, you actually see that fuel prices literally affect everything in this country. And so by not doing enough to bring down the cost, especially the reduction on the levies and things like that, then any rational citizen or consumer or producer of goods and services would, of course, pass it on to their customers. And that is what is happening. So you have really this very interesting, in my view, divergent paths that are being pursued by your treasury, and then on one hand, the central bank. And these are some of the policy inconsistencies that a few of us have actually highlighted, not today, but for a while now. So you're very right in reaching that conclusion.
Let me come to Duncan. This morning, there were 2 newspapers that reported that Bost had made a profit. I was asking Senyo about Refinery, and I was checking some data. Less than 4% of global refineries are in Africa. So it's like Africa, we don't refine. We basically just produce the crude, sell it, and somebody adds value and we buy the finished product. We've just been told that 20% of our imports goes into petroleum products. Shouldn't Bost and Tor be having a big conversation with Parliament? Shouldn't they call them and say, hey guys, what are you guys doing? Are they not part of the problem?
Well, Bernard, I think the most critical thing that the policy side should contemplate at this point is to restore those institutions we call safety nets. You cannot continue to be an oil-producing country and kick out your refinery. In fact, when Ghana had not even discovered in commercial quantity, the founding president was clear that there will come a time we would get oil in commercial quantity. So let's build a refinery in anticipation of that. That was vision. So Bernard, if we get to a point we start commercial production of oil and then we knock out the refinery, what it simply would mean is that you are going to depend on Europe for your economy to run, because virtually everything that your vehicles or engines would consume would have to be imported. And that also explains why the Ghanaian cedi has never been able to perform well. Because look at this, if you're going to import 50 million USD for petroleum products alone, you haven't done for food and other non-food items. Just petroleum alone, 450 to 500 million USD monthly. You can imagine how much it takes out of your economy. And so we have argued that by whatever means necessary, get Tor back on stream. By whatever means necessary. Because Tor would not only give you the necessary, inputs as far as your economy is concerned. They'll provide you the fuel security you need. Again, it would also reduce your logistical costs. The cost of shipping everything to Europe, converting it to finished products, shipping it back to Africa, paying for insurance, paying for freight, paying for throughput charges, paying for whatever premiums that will be charged. If you were taking your products from, Jubilee, your share of oil from Jubilee, and you needed to import from, say, Angola or any of the African producers, I'm sure that cost will be significantly reduced. Again, the refinery on its own has also gotten the potential to throw out other jobs. In fact, in the late 90s, one of the 2-3 things that was keeping Tema buoyant and active was Tor. And it single-handedly contributed more than 5% of Ghana's GDP.
When was the last time Tor refined oil? Do you know?
The last one I know was some tolling arrangement they had with Woodfields that probably didn't go.
That's over 3 years ago.
Over 3 years ago.
So for 3 years, Tor hasn't refined even
one liter that we know of. The only stories
you
hear.
But they are still employing people.
And they are paying workers.
So what do they do?
Basically, they have the tanks that BDCs can use. And so they have a certain revenue assurance.
So they store, they are storage facilities.
They've become a storage facility more or less.
So in 3 years, Tor hasn't even refined one bottle of...
None that we can speak to.
In 3 years?
Yes, none that we can speak to.
What about...
If you recall, there was an interim management that was put in place for a year or something plus to see to what will be done. Before the interim management, it wasn't refining in any way. After the interim, we are still not refining. We are fortunate to have some private hands currently trying to set up some
refineries.
Refinery, and even to revamp Tor, to get Tor back to work. Unfortunately, some hands somewhere would not want it to work. That I can state on authority.
So they are sabotaging.
Yes, the refinery.
So if a private person took over Tor, it may be promising.
Bernard, as I speak with you, there's a Chinese called Mr. Xu, just 600 meters from Tor, putting up the Central Refinery, putting up a brand new refinery. That probably will be way bigger than Tor. What does it tell you? The refining space is still profitable. It is still useful. He might be doing that on his own as a private business person, probably to take advantage of the Ghanaian, market space. But what it tells you is that if we made our refinery to behave like a refinery and not another political space where instead of probably hiring 500 people to run the refinery, you have over 1,000 that you need to pay. So Tor is not helping much. But the bigger problem for me right now would be with BOST.
Bulk oil storage.
In fact, BOST is the biggest headache Ghanaians should pay attention to currently.
They are making profit, according to the CEO.
I have seen those stories today, and I screamed. I said, look, when we cannot pay for petrol, you are charging us margins, called BOST margin, to maintain the facility, right? You are not playing to the core mandate for which we set you up. Bernard, trust me, if Ghana wanted to set up a private BDC, it will not come in the form of BOST. Yet BOST, as we speak today, is simply behaving like a private BDC who only trades, buy and sell. And so they can declare profit. But the BOST that was set up in 1993 with Gold funds was set up to behave like the Oklahoma cushioning in the United States. The US has a lot of storage for particularly crude oil. Now, what happens is that when they have any challenge in war times or in times when prices are so high, they release stock, right, to augment whatever that they have in the market. So we set up BOST to hold finished products so that in times to come when you have these kinds of crazy prices you find on the international market, there will be a BOST in there that says, look, I have enough product to stimulate this market for 3 months. Bernard, imagine if BOST had products as of probably March, right? And had stepped in to say, don't even import any further. What I have, I can trade to the people at 8 Ghana cedis. Because when I was buying it or stocking up, it was around 7 cedi. BOST would not lose. It will still be able to sustain the market. If the next day you need to go and buy from the open market and it has to go up by even 1 cedi, you'll be moving from 8 cedi instead of 13 Ghana cedi. And Bernard, I have said this over and over. We don't pay attention to petrol pricing. It's incremental. You are 13 cedi for diesel now. If it has to go up by 5%, it won't go up from 8 cedis. It will go up from the 13. If you had stayed it at 8 cedi, and it has to go up by 5% or even 10% because of international market dynamics, it will go from the 8 cedi. So our failure to take advantage of that system that BOST creates is simply part of the reasons we are where we are. That safety net, very important safety net, that should hold strategic stock to last at least a month, 2 or 3, is today busy trading, is today thinking of profit when Ghanaians are crying. And I think that if the BOST management, if the board are paying attention to this program, we are not happy with that. You go and make profit of what? 20 million. Meanwhile, what you could have saved Ghanaians could be in the region of 1 billion. But you are not living to that commandant. You are simply importing and selling. That is not why we set you up with the taxpayers' money.
We'll reflect on that. When we come back, we'll look at what will happen if the Russia-Ukraine war continues. Because that seems to be the big reason why things are happening. And when you look at Mr. Putin, it doesn't seem like he wants to stop now. So we'll do some calculations on what will happen if Rasputin decides that he's not going to stop this thing with Ukraine. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Point of View. Let me go to Theo Echampong as we wrap up. Theo, a couple of things. It seems our interest in exporting everything raw has continued with crude, and our processing capacity is very weak. From what we see with Russia and Ukraine, the fact that even Europe is suffering from Russia's decision to cut back on gas supplies to it, it's very clear energy is security. What are your quick thoughts on strategically what we should be doing to protect people from these price hikes and also to save ourselves? Because we don't know when Russia is going to stop fighting Ukraine. What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you once again, Bernard. I mean, the point is that every crisis offers opportunities, right? The challenge for us is that we never seem to learn. One, because there's too much politics, and number two, there are too many vested interests. Duncan was talking about TOR. I did my national service there many years ago, and yes.
Are you part of the problem?
In 2007, I did my service there, and even back then there were sort of challenges. But the point for me really is, why must a refinery of that caliber be turned into a glorified tank farm, as I call it? Right? It makes no sense to me, because people have their vested interest, and people are not allowing those what I call optimal or satisfying economic decisions to be made. If we want to solve this, the solutions are obvious. You need to refine locally. You need to add value locally. And it's not just even with petrol. You need to grow what you eat. We've been talking about this thing since, the better part of my adult life, right? But we seem to be interested in the talking rather than the doing. And in this instance, there are no shortcut solutions, unfortunately. I am even a bit worried because the more I pay attention to the data, the more it tells me that if we keep burning through our reserves as we currently are, and as the Bank of Ghana data shows, then in the latter part of this year, we might potentially be heading for some balance of payments, crisis. And the recourse then would be that we may have to, unfortunately, go back, to the IMF for one support or the other. And it comes back really to the point that we have not managed this economy as much as we should. The solutions are obvious. There are no immediate sort of, or there are no quick wins per se, beyond the government reducing the levies and the margins and the taxes. But the more fundamental structural reforms would take some time, but we need to take steps, practical steps to actualize them. Again, using TOR as an example, why a refinery of that size? It's a very small refinery, only 60 or so thousand barrels a day. Why do you need more than 600 plus people on the payroll when other refineries, even within the sub-region, have less than 100 people? They're using more current technology and processing that sort of crude. So the problems are much deeper and they're much more structural. The solutions are there and obvious. So I'm not really going to pontificate anything new here beyond what we really need to do. But we need to deal with the politics and we need to deal with the vested interests.
Thank you. Let me come to you to wrap this up. So you are the Chamber of Consumers. It's 13 for diesel, 11 for petrol. People are still cool. In your chat in the office, is there a price at which people will say we no go agree?
Bernard, every Ghanaian is bitter currently, and I have said that where we have gotten to is a crisis, and until we find a solution, it will derail this economy gravely by December. If nothing is done drastically, July will come with its own increases.
Hey,
the safety.
What, July is going to go up again?
Yes, it's going to go up again. Your city is still struggling. And I have said this. I was on another network with you this morning. If we don't find a solution to the city depreciation, Ukraine, whatever, can fight all they want, right? They can even stop fighting. Petrol price will still go up. In fact, before Russia, Ukraine, we're still going up. The city has not stopped depreciating.
So the problem is the city?
Yes, largely. And until we find a rather ingenious solution, we'll still be where we are. Bernard, one of the solutions that I am proposing on your network for the first time, you are not in very normal times. So let BOG, let Finance Ministry, let the Energy Ministry, let National Security sit and decide.
Oh, National Security, I mean.
Yes, they should. We are in a crisis, Bernard.
So BOG, MOF,
Yes.
Ministry of Energy,
National Security. They should sit. And one of the propositions I can freely offer, centralize your petroleum import at this point.
Centralize it.
Yes.
Bring everybody together.
Bring all the BDCs together. How much are you bringing in, Bernard? 1,000 metric. How much are you bringing in? 2,000, 3,000, 5,000. Okay. So how much are we bringing in per month? 10,000. There are the oil majors in Ghana currently. Throw it to them. What is the best price you can give me if I'm taking everything from you? Then you may be deriving economies of scale. Subsequently, you may also be reducing the city's influence on price, and I will show you how. When I need, as a BDC, if I need $10 million, I come to Bank A, oh, I need $10 million. Bank B, I need $10 million. C, $10 million. D, $10 million. E, $10 million. So eventually, what the actual demand is 10 million. But 5 banks are chasing for 10 million from the market.
Artificial.
So artificial demand for the city now goes to 50 million.
So bring the banks and the central bank together. Let's know what you all need at the same time.
Exactly.
So that we know the exact amount needed.
The exact
It will stop affecting the hike in the dollar.
And then they will stop also the forward projections, because everything is what the one who taught me this said is called a funnel arrangement. Funnel. Everything comes through one basket. The central bank knows what has come through. It knows how much BDC A, BDC C, or whatever took. So BDC A doesn't have to go to the other commercial banks and start demanding.
So this is your solution to the 1 month thing Senyo said. If we want to survive beyond a month,
yes,
everybody must be brought to the same table. Centralize
your imports immediately. Bring everybody to the table. Get the oil majors. BP is here, Vitol is here, Glencore is here, Trafigura is here. If you leave it to them, because they want to compete, Bernard, even if it's 1,300 metric, somebody will tell you, okay, I can give it to you 1,100 if you are buying all that from me, right?
So we don't need that now.
You would need to lock that in now. When you do that,
I guess you are saying we don't need that competition
now.
That
competition now, it's just not going to help, because we've done that thing and it's led us to 13. Maybe if you centralize everything, you may also even get a good deal for Bust.
Wow.
To store products so that by December, when crude goes to the 160 that is projected to go to, Boss can step into the market and say, I have 3 months for you.
Let's hope
you will be safe.
Mr. Kandapa and his people are listening, and let's hope the others are also listening. Thank you very much, Duncan Amoah. He is the CEO of the Chamber of Petroleum Consumers. We also had Dr. Theo Champong, who is an economist and a political risk analyst. Hope you learned something new.